How far can a desperate father fall before he stops being a father at all? The question hangs in the frozen Wyoming air like breath in the early morning, visible and inescapable, as New Year's snow lies crusted across the roofs of Red Creek Junction. The wind claws down the empty street, pushing dust and ice against the saloon doors, rattling the shutters, whispering secrets that no one wants to say aloud. Jack Lawson moves through that wind like a ghost of the man he once was, shoulders slumped under the weight of grief and whiskey, eyes hollowed out by too many nights he cannot remember. People used to nod when they saw him. Now they look away. Some feel pity, some judge. Most have simply given up on him, the way he nearly gave up on himself the night his wife Sarah died, when fever took her breath and left him alone with a crying baby and a heart that never found its way back. Emma Lawson is 7 years old and tiny in her patched coat, cheeks raw from the cold, hands tucked into the worn sleeves of her father's old gloves. She moves carefully, quietly, as if the world might break if she makes too much noise. Every morning she tries to rouse her father from the stupor of cheap liquor, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder, whispering his name. Some mornings he wakes gently, some mornings he doesn't, and every morning she still tries. She makes tea with water that barely stays warm. She straightens the house they have left. She pretends that things will get better, because pretending is the only thing that keeps the fear from tightening around her chest. There is one person who sees her clearly, Helen Brooks, who runs the general store at the corner of Main Street. Helen watches the little girl from behind the counter, heart aching as Emma slips in for bread or a few scraps, always polite, always shy. Helen gives her what she can and says nothing. In a town like this, secrets grow like wild brush, and sometimes the kindest thing is to help without asking questions. But debts have a way of growing too, and Jack's debts are piling higher than the snowdrifts outside. They lead straight to Victor Hale, owner of the Silver Lantern Saloon, a man whose wealth is measured not just in coins, but in the number of souls who owe him something. Victor doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. His smile is thin, his eyes calculating, his words always reasonable on the surface. He arrives one bitter New Year afternoon, boots crunching on frost as he steps into Jack's failing life with the precision of a man who knows exactly what he has come to collect. Jack sits at the table, whiskey already carving its path through his veins. Emma stands behind him, clutching the back of a chair. Victor lists the amount, $83, and the room seems to shrink around that number. Jack stares at the table, shame burning hotter than the liquor. Victor leans back, as if offering mercy, and presents a different kind of bargain. An acquaintance, Mr. Davenport, wants a girl to keep his elderly mother company. In exchange for permanent guardianship and the $5 silver placed neatly on the table, Jack's debts will simply disappear. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of breaking. Emma doesn't understand the contract. She only understands the look in her father's eyes, the emptiness, the surrender. She steps toward him, whispering his name, but his hand is already reaching for the pen. Fear swallows her voice. He signs. The scratch of ink across paper becomes a sound she will never forget, sharp like bone splintering. $5 silver flash in the lamplight, cold and bright and obscene. The day they choose to take her is colder still. Snow drifts along the street as Mr. Davenport arrives in a dark coat, expression unreadable. Emma clings to her father's sleeve, tears streaking her wind-burned face. She begs, she pleads. Her voice cracks in the frozen air. Jack cannot look at her for more than a second at a time. He is drowning, and the bottle has already dragged him under. That is when Samuel Grant steps forward from the edge of the gathering crowd. Samuel is not loud. He is not dramatic. He is simply steady, the way the earth feels steady beneath your boots. A rancher from miles out, he has come into town for supplies and found himself staring at a transaction that should never exist. He studies the contract. He studies Victor. He studies the terrified child wrapped in a thin coat. Then he says, calmly but unmistakably firm, that this is not legal. A transfer of guardianship must pass through a judge. This is not adoption. This is not charity. This is the sale of a child. His words cut through the street like a shot. People gather. Helen steps out from the store, protective gaze fixed on Emma. Murmurs rise. This isn't right. This isn't law. This isn't decent. Victor tries to smooth things over, but the heat of public shame burns brighter than the winter sun. Davenport shifts uneasily. The deal begins to crumble under the sheer weight of human conscience. Emma is still crying. Jack is shaking now, guilt and alcohol fighting for control inside his chest. Samuel doesn't shout. He places himself between the girl and the men who would take her. He says the law will not stand for this. He says the town will not stand for this. And for the first time in a long time, Red Creek Junction stands together. Victor retreats. Davenport follows. The $5 sit abandoned on the table like a curse. The crisis passes, but the damage remains. Jack sits alone that night, the bottle close at hand, his own choices echoing in his skull. Emma curls up on the narrow bed and pretends the walls are strong enough to keep the world out. Samuel does not disappear after the drama ends. He lingers, watching, thinking. He sees a man who has lost his way. He sees a child who deserves better than fear. And so, he makes a decision that will change all of their lives. He offers them a place. Not charity, not pity, a chance, a condition. Work for him, live at his ranch, leave the bottle behind, start again. The road will not be easy. Recovery never is. But there, beneath the winter sky, with the new year still young and the past still bleeding into the present, a spark of possibility takes hold. And Emma, clutching her father's hand with fragile hope, begins a journey she never asked for but desperately needs. A journey toward safety, toward family, toward the painful, complicated work of healing what despair nearly destroyed. The road to Samuel Grant's ranch stretches long and pale beneath the winter sky, a thin ribbon of frozen earth winding through empty fields and low hills dusted with snow. The wagon creaks steadily forward, wheels groaning under the weight of supplies, blankets, and 3 lives tied together now by desperation, guilt, and a fragile kind of hope that none of them dare name. Emma sits close to her father, her small hands wrapped around his arm. Jack is silent for most of the journey, eyes fixed on the horizon, jaw clenched as though he's trying to hold himself together by force alone. The whiskey that once kept the world blurry is gone from his pockets, and already his body has begun to notice. Samuel drives with quiet patience, glancing at them now and then, saying little. He knows better than to fill empty space with noise. Out here, silence has a way of revealing truth. The wind slides over the open land like a blade, cold and unforgiving. The light fades slowly, turning the sky amber, then violet, then black. Emma leans her head against Jack's shoulder and feels the tension twitch beneath his coat. His fingers tap restlessly. His breath comes too fast, then too slow. He swallows hard again and again, as though trying to push something heavy down his throat. By nightfall, the shaking starts. It isn't dramatic at first. It's just a tremor, a nervous quiver in his hands that grows into something sharper, more violent, like the earth itself is shifting under his skin. Sweat beads along his hairline despite the cold. He presses his palms into his thighs, as if he can pin the tremors in place. He can't. Samuel guides the wagon off the trail and sets a small campfire in the lee of some scrub pines. The flames flicker, reflecting in Jack's hollow eyes. Emma watches him with fear she tries to hide, her chin trembling despite her effort to be brave. Samuel lays out bedrolls and pours water from a tin canteen. He doesn't push. He doesn't scold. He simply states what Jack already knows. "You're going to have a rough night." Jack nods once, jaw tight, breath ragged. He lies down, curling inward like a wounded animal. The tremors deepen. His muscles seize without warning. His teeth chatter though the night is no colder than before. Thoughts race and shatter and race again. He hears Sarah's name whispered in the dark. Not from Emma, not from Samuel, but from some corner of his mind he has avoided for years. He tries to shut his eyes and escape, but there is nowhere left to run. The bottle is gone, and with its absence comes punishment. Emma crawls closer to him, whispering, "Daddy," her voice barely more than a thread. Samuel rests a steady hand on her shoulder and gently draws her back. "Stay close," he says softly, "but give him room." She obeys, even though every instinct tells her to hold on tighter. Jack's breath stumbles. His hands curl into fists. He mutters half-formed apologies into the darkness, words for Sarah, for Emma, for every mistake he cannot outrun. And then come the shadows, shapes flickering behind his eyelids, voices that aren't there. Fear thickens in his chest until it feels like drowning. He thinks he sees Davenport at the edge of the firelight. He thinks he hears Victor counting out silver coins. He thinks Emma is being pulled from him again. He tries to rise, and Samuel's firm hand presses him gently back down, grounding him to the earth, anchoring him to the moment. "You're here," Samuel says quietly. "She's safe. Stay with us." The hours drag. Emma does not sleep. She watches the man she loves most fight an enemy she cannot see, and for the first time in her life, she realizes how deep its claws truly run. When dawn finally spills pale gold across the hills, Jack is exhausted, soaked in sweat, his muscles trembling with every movement. But he is still there. He is still breathing, and the bottle has not won. The journey continues. Each mile feels like a test. Jack is weaker now, leaning against the wagon when they stop, his hands shaking, head aching, stomach twisting into painful knots. He apologizes without looking at Emma, voice hoarse and ashamed. She squeezes his hand and tells him it's all right. Samuel says nothing, but there is a quiet respect in his gaze, the kind that only comes from recognizing someone choosing to fight when it would be easier to fall. When they reach the ranch, the land opens wide and steady, framed by distant mountains and the long quiet of open sky. Fences stretch along the fields. Smoke rises from the main house chimney. Horses stand sheltering near the barn, their breath ghosting into the cool air. Tom Walker comes out to meet them, coat buttoned tight, face stern at first glance, but softened by the eyes of a man who has already walked this road. He shakes Jack's hand and says simply, "We'll take it one day at a time." It's not a promise of ease. It's not a lie meant to soothe. It's the truth, plain and heavy and strangely comforting. Every day after that becomes a step in a long, uneven climb. Samuel sets rules. Work during the day, rest at night, no liquor on the property, and honesty above all else. Jack struggles through chores with trembling hands, feeding livestock, mending broken boards, finding his footing again in the rhythm of physical labor. Some days he feels steady. Some days the ground tilts beneath him, but Emma is always nearby. Reading with Miss Clara when the teacher makes her monthly stop, chasing the barn cats across the hayloft, laughing for the first time in years. Jack watches her and realizes that sobriety is not only about survival. It is about giving her a life where fear is no longer ordinary. At night, when darkness presses against the windows and the scent of wood smoke fills the room, his mind still tries to drag him backward. Memories, regrets, the bottle calling like a familiar voice. But now there is another presence standing between him and that call. Samuel, Tom, Emma, a fragile hope. And as the winter weeks pass, Jack begins, slowly, painfully, to remember what it feels like to be a father again, rather than a man trying to disappear. Redemption has no shortcuts. He learns this the hard way. But for the first time, he is willing to make the climb. The weeks that follow begin to shape themselves into something that almost resembles peace, though it is a fragile kind. The kind that feels as if a single harsh wind could scatter it like dust across the open Wyoming plains. The ranch breathes with routine. Morning light filters through the frost-rimmed windows. Roosters crow. Horses stamp their hooves in the cold, and life moves forward in small, steady steps. Emma wakes early each day, slipping quietly from her bed to pull on boots that are a little too big and a coat patched at the elbows. She likes to stand at the doorway for a moment, watching the sky blush pink over the distant hills, knowing the day ahead holds work but also safety. For a child who has lived so long with fear sitting at the table like a silent guest, safety feels almost unreal. She follows Tom Walker around the yard sometimes, listening as he explains the daily rhythm of the ranch. Tom never speaks down to her. He uses simple words and a patient voice, even when his face remains rugged and unreadable. He tells her about the horses, about weather signs in the clouds, about how to fix a broken hinge without losing your temper. Emma stores every word away like treasures. She also spends more time with Miss Clara Whitman when the traveling teacher visits. Miss Clara spreads her books across the kitchen table, smiling warmly as Emma struggles through reading lessons, sounding out each word with stubborn determination. The letters begin to make sense. The sentences open up like doors, and Emma starts to believe there might be a future ahead that belongs to her, not just something she survives through. Jack works. That is the simplest way to describe it. He works when he is tired, when his muscles ache, when his mind tries to drag him back toward the bottle that no longer waits for him. He repairs fences alongside Tom. He feeds cattle, stacks hay, and learns again how to move with purpose instead of drifting through days like a man trapped between dreams. His hands grow steadier. His breath slows. Sometimes he still wakes at night with the ghosts of feverish fear clinging to him. But he sits at the edge of the bed and waits for the shaking to pass, whispering Emma's name under his breath like a prayer. Samuel keeps his distance at times, watching quietly, offering advice only when necessary. He is a presence more than a voice. And yet, that presence becomes a pillar, something Jack leans on simply by knowing it is there. Samuel understands that there are battles a man must fight alone, but he also understands that no one should have to fight without someone standing near enough to catch them if they fall. Slowly, trust begins to take root. At first, it is only in small ways. Emma laughs more freely. Jack lifts his head when he walks through the yard. Tom lets him handle more responsibility. Samuel includes him in decisions about the livestock or the land. Each of these moments is a thread. Together they begin to weave something stronger than either shame or fear. And yet, beneath it all, the past remains like a scar under the skin. No one pretends it never happened. No one erases it. Instead, they learn to live beside it. Emma still remembers the day she nearly lost everything. Jack still carries the sound of pens scratching across paper in his chest like a wound. Samuel still carries the weight of stepping between a child and a world willing to harm her. But memory becomes something they acknowledge rather than drown in. The ranch itself helps. There is a strange kind of healing in labor that asks nothing but effort, in land that gives back only what is earned through patience and sweat. Jack learns to fix broken gates without cursing himself for the past. He learns to saddle a horse without trembling fingers. He learns that he can be useful again, and usefulness, it turns out, is a powerful medicine. Tom, meanwhile, becomes both mentor and quiet friend. One cold evening, as they sit by the fire after the day's work, Tom speaks plainly about the life he used to live, about bottles hidden behind barns, about nights he cannot remember, about how long it took for the guilt to stop burning his throat. He doesn't offer Jack advice dressed up as wisdom. He simply tells the truth. And truth has a way of lifting the weight of silence. Jack listens, not looking at him, but every word sinks in. He realizes he is not the first man to fall, and more important, he is not the first man to stand back up. Emma senses the change too. She runs through the fields when the weather softens, laughing as the barn cats follow at her heels. She sends Samuel small smiles that thank him without words. She curls up at night and sleeps without fear of waking to strangers at the door. And when Jack sits beside her, reading slowly from Miss Clara's worn books, she leans against him with trust instead of caution. But even fragile peace carries tension beneath it. There is always the sense that the world is watching, waiting to test whether this newfound steadiness is real or merely temporary. At the edge of that calm lies Jack's greatest fear, that one mistake, one dark night, one moment of weakness could tear everything away again. He holds on to sobriety not only because he wants to live, but because losing Emma again would destroy him completely. Samuel knows this, Tom knows this, and even Emma, in her innocent way, understands that their lives balance on Jack's determination. So the days move forward in a rhythm that is both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because chores, meals, and sleep repeat as they always have. Extraordinary because every small success is another stone laid into the foundation of a life rebuilt. When spring edges toward the land and the snow melts into rivers that carve through the fields, the ranch feels less like a refuge borrowed from strangers and more like a home, one earned through effort, sacrifice, and the courage to keep going. Hope doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It slips in quietly, like morning light through a narrow window. And though none of them say the words aloud, all three begin to believe that the worst might truly be behind them. They are wrong. But for now, the peace holds. And sometimes peace, even a fragile one, is enough to keep a man standing when the past comes calling again. The peace never announces the moment it begins to crack. It happens quietly, like a faint tremor beneath the ground, felt first in instinct rather than sound. One gray afternoon, while Samuel and Jack are repairing a stretch of fencing along the north pasture, a lone rider appears on the ridge. The figure sits still for a long while, watching the ranch, letting his horse paw the frozen earth. Then he turns and disappears without a word. Samuel notices. Jack notices. Neither of them says anything at first, but the air feels colder even after the sun returns. 2 days later, Victor Hale arrives. He does not ride alone this time. 2 men flank him. Hard eyes, clenched jaws, hands never far from their holsters. Victor sits tall in the saddle, his coat immaculate despite the dust of the road. He smiles as if greeting old acquaintances, but his eyes betray nothing except calculation. Emma watches from the porch, her fingers gripping the wooden railing until her knuckles turn white. Jack steps forward, shoulders squared, sobriety etched across his face like battle scars. Samuel stands beside him, not threatening, not reckless, simply unmovable. Victor begins with politeness. He speaks of contracts, debts, obligations. He claims the guardianship transfer was legitimate. He talks about Mr. Davenport's disappointment. He uses the word agreement instead of sale, as though changing the shape of the word can change the truth beneath it. His voice carries easily through the cold air. Every sentence is soaked in control. But when Samuel calmly repeats that the document holds no legal ground, that Emma is staying here, Victor's expression sharpens. Courtesy dissolves. Threat replaces it. He makes no direct promise of violence. Men like Victor rarely do, but he lets implication hang between them like a noose. He knows where the ranch lies. He knows who lives here, and he has more than money. He has men willing to carry out his will. When he leaves, the wind seems louder. That night, Samuel sits at the table, pen scratching across paper as he drafts formal complaints to the territorial authorities. He documents every threat, every attempt at coercion. It is not foolish hope that the law will wholeheartedly protect them. It is strategy, creating a line of record that cannot be erased. Jack watches him, feeling a burn of shame again for ever having signed anything that could place his daughter in danger. But Samuel does not blame him. He simply works, and that steadiness once again becomes a pillar Jack leans on. Days pass, work continues, but tension coils beneath every small movement. Tom organizes quiet watch shifts, neighbors like the Henderson brothers taking turns riding the property line at night. No one speaks of fear openly. They simply prepare. The attack comes on a moonless night. Emma wakes to the sound first. Not voices, not gunshots, but the crackle of flames devouring dry wood. She sits up, heart pounding as orange light flickers through the window. The barn is burning. Samuel is already moving before the alarm fully breaks. Jack races past him, barefooted on frozen ground, shouting Emma's name, then realizing she is right behind him, shaking and wide-eyed. Tom grabs buckets, shouting for water. Horses scream inside the blazing barn, hooves thundering in panic, smoke rising in violent plumes against the night sky. Figures appear at the edge of the firelight. Dark silhouettes, armed. Samuel pulls Jack back for a breath, voice low but firm. Control first, rage later. They split tasks. Tom and Jack rush to the barn doors, forcing them open despite the searing heat. Samuel positions himself between the fire and the intruders, stance calm and ready. The flames roar louder, embers swirling like angry spirits. Emma, heart in her throat, mounts one of the calmer horses and rides hard toward the Henderson property, Samuel's final words echoing in her ears. "Go! Get help!" Don't look back. Inside the inferno, Jack fights the smoke clawing at his lungs. He cuts loose terrified animals, guiding them out into the night while Tom drives them clear of the flames. Every second feels stolen from disaster. Sparks rain over them. Wood groans under the force of heat. And then the intruders move closer. One lifts his gun. Samuel speaks first, voice steady, eyes never blinking. He doesn't threaten, he warns. The law is now involved. The town is paying attention. Crossing this line will not go unnoticed. The man hesitates, the other does not. The barn erupts further, and in that split second, the world teeters on a razor's edge. Hoofbeats thunder across the valley. Lanterns appear on the horizon. The Henderson brothers arrive first, then others. Neighbors roused from sleep by Emma's frantic knock at their doors. The ranch fills with people who refuse to allow injustice to take root here. The intruders falter under the sudden flood of witnesses. Their courage dissolves in the light. They retreat into the darkness, swallowed by the night as quickly as they came. The fire still burns. But now there are hands. Dozens of hands, passing buckets, shouting orders, dragging water from the well, fighting until the angry blaze finally gasps its last breath and collapses into smoking ruin. Silence follows. A barn reduced to char. A child safe. A father standing upright. A community bound even tighter than before. Emma dismounts and runs to Jack. He pulls her into his arms and holds on so tightly it almost hurts, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the proof that she is alive, here, his. Samuel claps a steady hand onto Jack's shoulder. Tom leans against a fence post, chest heaving, eyes shining with something close to relief. Later, when the night grows quiet again, Samuel finishes the complaints he began. Now they include arson. Now they include threats with witnesses. He sends them out immediately, not out of vengeance, out of necessity. The paper trail grows thicker, harder to ignore. The next morning the town arrives again, but this time in daylight, with lumber instead of weapons, with nails, rope, tools, with strong backs and calm resolve. No speeches, no drama, just work. Together they rebuild what hate tried to destroy. Each hammer strike becomes a declaration, "You are not alone here." Jack joins them without hesitation. His hands blister, his shoulders ache. But every plank he sets into place feels like redemption made physical, like proof that his past no longer decides Emma's future. By the time the barn stands again, simpler but strong, the balance of power has shifted. Victor Hale still exists out there, bitter and watchful. But he is no longer the strongest force in their lives. Community is. And from that strength, something deeper begins to take root. The knowledge that love, loyalty, and chosen family can turn even the harshest frontier into a place where people stand together instead of breaking apart. Years pass in the quiet way seasons do on the Wyoming frontier, marked not by clocks or calendars but by harvests, storms, and the steady rhythm of hooves across open ground. The ranch grows older with them, weathering summers of heat that hums across the fields and winters that freeze the world into stillness. What began in crisis slowly turns into a life. Emma Lawson becomes a young woman before anyone quite realizes when the change began. One day she is a child running through tall grass with barn cats chasing her heels, And the next, she stands beside Samuel and Jack, helping tally accounts, speaking calmly with neighbors, riding confidently across the land she has come to love. Safety has shaped her into someone steady, thoughtful, and kind. She laughs easily. She listens deeply. And though the past still lives in her memory, it no longer rules her heart. Jack grows older too, but in a different way. Sobriety does not erase the years he lost to grief, but it gives meaning to the years that follow. Some days the craving returns like a ghost pressing at the edge of his thoughts. When it does, he walks the fields or sits in silence by the fire until the feeling passes. He speaks more openly now, especially with Tom Walker. They share quiet evenings, cups of coffee instead of whiskey, conversations about regret and the way a man must choose who he wants to be every single day. Tom never treats Jack like a patient or a confession booth. He treats him like a friend, and that simple respect becomes another anchor holding Jack steady. Emma continues her studies with Miss Clara whenever the traveling teacher comes through. Books stack on the small table by her bed, old novels, histories, even ledgers on ranch management that Samuel quietly slides her way, pretending not to notice when she devours them. She learns not only to read, but to think, not only to dream, but to plan. The ranch becomes not just a refuge, but a future. There are sorrows too, because no life is free of them. When Tom Walker passes away one calm autumn night, slipping away in his sleep with the easy grace of a man who has finally forgiven himself, the ranch feels his absence like a missing beam in its frame. Jack stands beside the grave with tears he does not hide. Samuel says little, because grief does not always need words. Emma, now a teenager, presses her hands together and thanks Tom silently for teaching her father how to stand again. Loss hurts, but it does not break them. Instead, it reminds them of the fragile, precious weight of every day they still have together. Victor Hale drifts steadily into the past. The complaints Samuel filed long ago build a record that makes it harder and harder for him to threaten or manipulate anyone without consequence. Davenport disappears from conversation entirely. Red Creek Junction changes. The town remembers, but it also moves forward. And the ranch, standing firm after everything, becomes a quiet story people tell when they want to believe that decency can still win. Samuel continues as he always has, watching, protecting, building. He never once claims authority over Jack or Emma. He simply stands beside them, offering strength without demand, guidance without control. Over time, his role shifts from rescuer to something far more intimate. A member of the family they chose, not one they were given by blood. He carries his own scars, his own memories of a father lost to alcohol. But instead of letting that wound harden him, he lets it deepen his compassion. Emma turns 21 on a soft winter evening as the first days of a new year settle across the land, echoing the cold season in which her life nearly changed forever. The sky burns orange, then violet, then fades into the deep blue of night. Snow dusts the fields like sugar. A warm fire glows inside the house. Jack sets out a small wooden box, the one he crafted years ago, polished smooth from careful hands and time. Inside lies Sarah's wedding ring, glinting gently in the lamplight. He doesn't give it to Emma as a burden of memory, but as a reminder of love. Both the love that once was and the love that has carried them forward. They sit together on the porch as the sun sinks. Emma, Jack, Samuel. 3 people tied together not by blood, but by choice. They speak quietly about years gone by, the barn fire, the early mornings of hard work, the steady rebuilding of their lives. There is sadness in those memories, but also pride. Survival has become something more than endurance. It has become transformation. Emma looks across the land, heart full. She has had opportunities to leave, to study elsewhere, to marry, to drift toward a different life. But each time, she chooses to stay. Not because she is trapped, not because she owes a debt, but because this place is home. These men are family. The love they share has crossed every boundary sorrow tried to draw between them. It has turned strangers into kin. It has turned despair into redemption. Jack watches her with quiet gratitude. He knows how close he once came to losing her. The memory will never fade, but it no longer crushes him. Instead, it reminds him of what he must keep fighting for: sobriety, presence, love. He has failed before. He may stumble again, but he will never stop choosing her. Samuel simply sits back, listening to the wind brush across the fields, content in the knowledge that he helped build something good in a world that does not always offer such chances. He doesn't need applause. He doesn't need recognition. The life before him is enough. And in that peaceful moment, gathered beneath a quiet sky, they finally understand something simple and profound. Redemption is not a single miracle. It is the sum of 1,000 small choices, made every day, to protect one another, to care, to stay. Chosen family is not an idea. It is a promise, and they have kept it. In the gentle close of this story, the light softens and the voices grow quieter. Emma sits with Jack and Samuel as winter settles around the ranch, and the years that once hurt so deeply now feel like distant echoes. The danger has passed. The fear has faded. What remains is warm and steady, like the glow of a lantern in the dark. They have lost, and they have healed. They have fought through shadows and found something bright on the other side. Family, they now know, is not only the people we are born to, but also the people who choose to stay beside us when life grows difficult. Jack still carries his struggles, but he no longer carries them alone. Samuel still protects, not out of duty, but out of love. And Emma, grown and strong, becomes the heart that binds them all together. The barn stands rebuilt. The land stretches calm and open beneath the wide western sky, and the story settles gently into the quiet truth that love, forgiveness, and redemption can turn even the harshest frontier into a home. And so, the wind drifts softly across the fields, and the night closes like a tender whisper. End of article. Good night.